Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Gail Fleming. We're going to be discussing her amazing children's narrative, How Did You Come to School Today? Available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any online book reseller. You're going to want to head on over there, pick up your copies, and while you're at it, look into her other children's narrative, The Lumpy Bumpy Pumpkin. I'll say that 5 times fast. I love it. Check out both of these fantastic books. These are journeys that you're going to want to embark upon with your children, and they are sure to love it. Before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Miss Gail was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And of course, you already know I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So listen to me. If you're a writer out there, you have embarked upon your journey and spent an immense investment in creating your masterpiece, and now you find yourself in a precarious position because, well, now you need help moving the book you just finished creating. Well, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice. Contact ARP. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and people, this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Miss Gail here on the line. Now, the moment you start to do research on her book, How Did You Come to School Today?, you're going to understand the journey that you and your children are going to embark upon, okay? It is all about encouraging children, and hopefully some adults as well, to use their imaginations, okay? And this is one thing that, as unfortunate as it is, and the reason why I incorporate adults, it's a children's narrative, so that's really where we're focusing today. But adults can benefit from this as well, because as we get older, we start to lose connections with that little childlike voice inside of us. We step away from our imaginations, which is really a very unfortunate circumstance. And I get it. Adulting comes with its own pressures and responsibilities. So we don't really have time, depending on the background that you are in and your career choice. Imagination probably doesn't fit into your day-to-day lives. But this is a fantastic book because it's going to encourage our children to do just that. I love it. This is something fantastic. This is a beautiful book that you're going to want to add to your shelf. It's an even better gift you're going to want to add to someone else's. And at the end of the day, Miss Gail is the expert. She's written the book, and she's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So do me a favor, sit back and strap in. Miss Gail, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you today?
I am doing just fine, and thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being so kind. When children go, the reason I titled the book like I did, as school can be, but the journey, it isn't necessarily to school. It can be to their daycare, to their child care provider. Mm-hmm. But it's a place where they go outside of their home and learn, and it's a special place for them. And so the journey is to their special place.
Absolutely.
And how they get there can be lots of fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love it. Listen, Miss Gail, this is fantastic. And I have so many questions that I'd love to go into, and a lot of ideas already coming to mind. But I'm going to hone off on all of those, and we're going to start by learning a little bit more about yourself. So please tell us more about your background.
Okay, well, I grew up in rural Illinois we used to call it a farmette because it was an acre of land, and but we were in the country, and all around us were fields and timber and creeks, gravel roads. We could walk. I was free to go out and explore the natural surroundings. And I had paths through the woods where I would follow, and I'd make little huts sometimes, or, just explore my natural world. And it was so fun. It's liberating to be able to go into nature, to connect with that. And yeah, my mom's mantra was go outside and play. So we were always outside. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, but there was times that I would go exploring on my own. And in those days, I say these are the olden days, by the way. Back in the late 50s, early 60s, when you could go walking down the road, and by the way, I walked to school or rode a horse, but yeah, the walking down the road was, nobody thought anything of it. The neighbors were all there. You kind of watched out. Everybody watched out for everybody else, and it was. I had an amazing childhood. We just so happy that I had wonderful, fun siblings. I had terrific parents, who worked hard and made our lives fun. I guess that's a good way to put it. And all the time growing up, I was always creating stories in my head. So when I did get older, after I went to college and decided to pursue teaching preschool, which was a choice for me because I wanted to get to work with children when they were a blank slate.
Yeah.
Because when they're 3 years old, they're sponges. They just absorb everything, and to be able to work with them was a dream come true for me. And so many of the stories that I had created when I was young, and so many of the experiences that I had that I could share with these young people. It was wonderful. Growing up was wonderful.
Ms. Gail, thank you very much for articulating that. And, there's one thing that you said in terms of about being outside, being in nature, and the benefit of that. I oftentimes, my wife and I will we've had this conversation a number of times, and how truly blessed we feel that we grew up in a time where technology was not nearly as advanced as it is today. When we were much younger, the internet wasn't even around, right? And if it started to come into existence, it was very, very basic. So we also were always outside. We were always playing. And I think that's something that unfortunately has been lost to a lot of younger generations, and potentially will only be worse in future generations because the way technology is advancing, listen, these kids don't want to go outside anymore, right? But it is so important.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that there is something key to really honing in on that and encouraging that. And that's a conversation for another day. And Ms. Gail, we'll bring you back on for
definitely.
That one.
Yeah, I could go on and on about that one.
Absolutely. Listen, when it comes to your book, How Did You Come to School Today? Talk to us about inspiration behind it. Why did you feel compelled to write this book and put it out for the public?
I was teaching art. I taught art for 3 years at a Montessori school, and I needed a book, or I needed something. I would always open my class with a story, and my daughter had just gotten back from Nepal, and she had told me stories about how the kids go to school. Sometimes they'd hop on a cart, or they'd take a Vespa or whatever to school, or however they could get there. Or walking usually was their mode of transportation. Yeah. But she had just gotten back, and the thing about working at a Montessori school, because I have to kind of build around this explanation. There are children from all over the world. I worked in a university town, So there were children from all over the world. We had children from India, China, Nepal, Italy, Iceland. I just remember looking back, and it was like, what a wonderful opportunity for me. And the thing about it was, these children had this huge variety of experiences. And how do you come to school? There was a little boy from Mongolia, or it was from Mongolia, and he said he used to ride a pony to school. And he was bringing his daughter to the Montessori school. So that kind of inspired me to write my own story for this diverse group of children that I had, because I couldn't find one. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find one that was already published. So I wrote my own, and I used it in the classroom for the 3 years that I taught art down there.
Love that.
And it was a lot of fun. But what it did is it encouraged conversation. It just sparked their imagination. Then they could turn around and think, what about, maybe I could go to school this way, mm-hmm. And then they could create that, or they could draw a picture of it. They could, but it would start conversation and get their imaginations going.
What a great notion of, listen, people, if you can't find the resource that you're looking for, well, be that trailblazer and create it yourself. I think that is a message of inspiration and one of just a fantastic notion, right? And I know it has nothing to do with the book, but it is something very, very poignant that I wanted to make sure I pointed out. People, again, you got to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Pick up your copy of How Did You Come to School Today by Gail Fleming. While you're at it, pick up the other book, The Lumpy Bumpy Pumpkin, both of which are available for purchase, as I mentioned, through Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Miss Gail, next question here, and really a curiosity for myself, but what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, something that maybe surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
I did not intend to draw all the pictures for this book. I wanted to use photographs, and it took probably about a year. And my daughter said, "Mom, just draw the pictures." I'm not the greatest artist in the world, but I had a lot of pictures in my portfolio that I could pull out, and that's where a lot of the pictures came from. And they're very simple, but that also enables children to put themselves in the picture.
Yeah.
And a little, I have to put a plug in there for my sister. My sister was the most familiar with our pony as our horse as I was growing up when I was very little. And there's a picture of her in the book on the horse. So it's the only photograph that I ended up using because I couldn't, it had to be there.
There you have it.
Does that sort of answer your question?
Oh, absolutely.
I think I lost track of the question.
No. Absolutely.
Okay.
I love it. And, making it a bit of a family affair now by adding in that photo. That's fantastic. Ms. Gail, as we start to close out here, we have a few extra minutes, and I want to give you an opportunity to go into your other narrative, The Lumpy Bumpy Pumpkin. First and foremost, there's something about that title that is absolutely enticing and just captivating. It not only is a tongue twister, it's so fun to say. The imagery that comes to mind is amazing. Talk to our listening audience a little bit more about that narrative. Give us a bit of what to expect when we pick up that one.
It was only just very few years ago when they started coming out with different varieties of pumpkin. Now, I live in an agricultural area, and we have several farmers markets. But most of the pumpkins we get are the smooth ones that you carve. And if you go to the big box stores or whatever, or the grocery stores, they have the smooth pumpkins that you can carve. Well, then just a few years ago, they started coming out with different varieties and different colors of pumpkins. And I noticed that people had an issue with pumpkins that were bumpy. They had like big bumps and knobs on them. And it's like they didn't want those. At least then they didn't want them. So I thought, well, if I was a pumpkin, I'd feel really sad if nobody wanted me, And then I started looking at, you look at a bicycle that's maybe pink and you wanted a blue one, or you look at, or maybe it's got a flat tire, or you look at different things that are in the world that aren't perfect. Mm-hmm. But if you love them, if you can take care of them, if you bring them home, then and you accept them, and you find out they're pretty cool. It's kind of what the lumpy, bumpy pumpkin is about. Nobody wanted him, and so until a teacher found him sitting on the sidewalk and took him to school. That book is actually full of photographs, and it was actually I think it was the year before I retired from the Montessori school. I took the pictures for the lumpy, bumpy pumpkin.
Mm-hmm. People, listen, I'm recognizing a pattern here. I'm recognizing a through line, because what is magnificent with both of these books is the educational aspect underneath. When we're talking about the lumpy, bumpy pumpkin, it's really teaching children, and again, another book that I'm going to say has so much benefit for adults as well, to not judge, hypothetically, people, but in this instance, things, by its appearance, seeing past the appearance and what else is underneath, right? The value and what it represents outside of that. There is so much happening here. And again, fantastic educational notions for your children. And it makes sense. She's an educator at heart. So whether she's in the classroom or out, the education doesn't stop. Ms. Gail, as we close out of here today, we have covered so much information. But is there anything else that we haven't yet covered that you really want to make sure our listening audience here is aware of?
Yes, I would like to mention that How Did You Go to School Today, or How Did You Come to School Today, pardon me, is going to be published in Spanish. And hopefully will be, it'll be released before the end of the year. And I'm really excited about that because there are millions of Spanish-speaking people in the world. And I just think making that available it's making that available to even more children. And that's exciting for me.
This is fantastic stuff. People, you know where you got to go. Once again, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other places. Simply type in the information in a Google search bar, and you're going to be greeted with a number of sites that you're going to be able to purchase these books. And this is something you're going to want to add to your shelf. As I mentioned to you before, the education is amazing. The underlying notion behind it, what they symbolize, what they represent, are key for your children and also for you. Head on over there today. It starts with How Did You Come to School Today? But also check out the other one, The Lumpy Bumpy Pumpkin by Gail Fleming. You can thank me later because these are resources you are going to be ecstatic to have on your shelf. Miss Gail, this has been a true pleasure. Okay, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Oh, Benji, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.